everybody, and welcome to the very first edition of Change Point Conversations. I am Patrick Kelly, founder and president of Change Point Consulting, and I'm here with Toma, the CEO and co-founder of House of Genius. And thank you very much for being the inaugural guest.
Tescumbi, it's always fun.
It's always good. It's always good. We're here at Industry, a collaborative workspace, which is pretty awesome. Drinking beers, of course, as you do, and enjoying the day. But Toma, let's get into it. First of all, tell me a little bit about you and the background of House of Genius.
Sure. Let's see. My background's in physics and computer science. I was really fortunate enough to go to the School of Mines, and I came out of school at what I call the high watermark of the .com. A lot of job offers back then, a little bit different than it used to be, or at least it seems like it is today. And it was a much different time. There was money being thrown around everywhere. It was sort of almost entrepreneurial and startup at that time, but also still very corporate, very technology finding its way and how it integrates into business. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of just landed in it. I thought I was going to be a professional baseball player, and
I did too.
Yeah, and
then high school came.
I still do, actually. I still do.
You still got it, right?
Yeah. I just keep waiting for the Rockies to call. And
they're bad enough. That might work.
But I was fortunate enough. I got to lead some teams right out of school that were acquired by Red Hat Linux and Computer Associates. That bubble burst, and I took a more traditional consulting project. That 6 months in, they asked me to become their CTO, and that was Jason's Deli. Mm-hmm. It's about a $500 million restaurant chain in I think 5 states now along the South, and served in that role for just shy of 5 years, mm-hmm. and then committed career suicide, according to all my colleagues and friends, to go caddy for my cousin on the PGA Tour.
It's awesome. So cool.
It was a lot of fun, and spent 2 years there living and breathing sort of a leadership philosophy of servant leadership, mm-hmm. Which was really powerful for me. Putting all of my talents, all my skills, and my ambitions behind somebody else's dreams, and seeing how rewarding that could be, and really understanding what it meant to get behind someone, not just in a sort of lip service. I support the people who work for me. This is all about you, but instead like living it and breathing it and doing everything you can, and like really trying to be creative about it every day. And so brought that back almost into the corporate world when I caught the entrepreneurial bug. And I've been involved in 4 or 5 various entrepreneurial projects, either as the founder, CEO, and in one case an investor. Yeah. And I find that space is really well suited for my gifts and talents, which is a little more rabble-rousing, and I call myself a wandering problem solver now. But it affords me an opportunity to really look at paradigms and frameworks and to try to poke at them and see how we can get them to evolve versus just iterate. Yeah. And I kind of like that space.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I've been to a couple House of Genius events, which is your new brainchild, and probably the coolest event that I've been to in a long time, as far as networking and as far as community, as far as collaboration. By far one of the coolest things. Everybody should check it out. houseofgenius.org, is that right?
Yep, houseofgenius.org.
Yep.
And it's an entrepreneurial community service, so it's really about connecting a broader community to the innovative and entrepreneurial efforts in every community that we're in. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that group, and you had mentioned career suicide, and one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about, which is I think there's a dividing point that's happening for a lot of young people, which is they're questioning what the traditional path should be, right? Where you go to school and then you work hard and diligent for 20 to 25 years and hope you have that retirement, and that's that normal path. But I see a lot of people questioning that path, especially that younger generation, and people around here in industry are doing that. What was it that made you divide and made you kind of buck that trend and go to the different side? Or what do you think that corporations are struggling with, or why aren't they getting some of those good people like you, or why are they losing people like you? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Well, one, I think you're right, and I think they're right to question the traditional path. I don't think that, whatever that even means actually, but, the traditional path seems to have been built during a very industrial age, very assembly line, which also meant very predictable. And when technology and business collided, right, in a really meaningful way, I think that entire model was immediately going to be put under pressure, right? And, the idea that right now, even in the academic space, the idea that you will go and take a 4-year degree, what you start studying and what you end up studying, especially if it's in the engineering or technology space, might be outdated by the time you get out. And so that path doesn't even necessarily work at the outset in academia, let alone when you come out and you're trying to struggle to look for work and trying to find a job, which I know understand is incredibly difficult. Yeah. And so, the notion that you're going to come and work your way up rungs of a ladder I think that metaphor just doesn't apply anymore. And for those of us, like myself, when I came in, I was already kind of pushing at it, right? I'm not necessarily a millennial, I'm just ahead of that. But I was really poking at it right away because it's like, look, I see the path my father took, and I don't see that trajectory working for me. And when you would start to ask the powers that be, if you will, the people who are in directors or VPs or even in the C-suite, and you would ask them, hey, is there a way to leapfrog through this? Is there a way to, can I, do I just get on the assembly line and I get there when I get there?
No, because that means you're entitled and you just want to be the boss and you're unwilling to put in the work and all those things that we hear so often.
And what's funny is, a lot of that sort of climbing the corporate ladder was not just responsibility or like the ability to like tackle certain problems, but it was also, it's really income based, right?
Yeah.
Like how much do you deserve to make and when? And I don't believe that when people come out of school, yes, you want to make a lot of money, but you want to make a difference. You're still really fired up. You're still not, you're not cynical, and like you don't have all the skepticism of somebody who's been in business for like 30 years and feel like you've seen it all.
Yet those people, as soon as you come in, they want to make you skeptical, and they're like, you're so naive, you're young, you're not jaded yet. Like, let's go sit over there for 10 or 15 years and wait till you're jaded, and then we can have a conversation, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that comes from two places, right? Like one is, I don't want to feel like I was born in the wrong era where I had to work 30 years to get where it took you 3.
Yeah.
Right. That just doesn't feel good.
No.
Right. Especially when it's happening right in front of you.
Yep.
And so there's a little bit of the human psyche and ego at play there.
Yeah.
And then the other one is, there are certain elements of the social aspect and like the teamwork aspect and what I would call sort of radius of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like you make a decision, and how far does it go? And sometimes you have to be in the game for a while to understand that piece.
Yeah.
And you don't get to leapfrog that as a millennial. And so I feel like, you still there's still plenty to learn and plenty to teach from sort of the older generation. And the younger generation is, I think, right to not be and feel beholden to any sort of framework or the way the paradigm was set up before they got there.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, people always say, well, it's just business. If that's true, then the paradigm and framework should always be flexible and willing to, be adjusted.
Yeah.
Not because it serves you, but because it serves the business. And I think that's where you get the sort of human business conflict that always exists.
Absolutely.
There's a tension there.
Yeah, I think you hit on it exactly right. I think people are questioning the way that we're working and interacting is completely changing. The way that work interacts with our life, the way that technology interacts with our life. I've talked about this before, where I think the idea of work-life balance is obsolete as well, because the idea of work-life balance is you have to be these two different people. You're a work person, you're a life person. And I think for a lot of young people, they want their life to be one, that everything overlaps. The more that they can take ownership of all facets and not necessarily have to separate these two worlds, the more that you're going to see collaboration, you're going to see involvement. I think that's tough for some of the older generations still, where it was, you work from 8 in the morning till 5, and that's your work time, and then from 5 p.m. till 8 in the morning, that's personal time. I think with technology and everything, there's a shift in how people look at that within their life.
No question. I mean, the idea that you have to get work done at a specific place, right, is obsolete. But that's also a difficult thing to let go of or to truly embrace. Mm-hmm. And it's a double-edged sword too. I've managed remote teams that have been spread out, but from Singapore to Ankara, Turkey, and God bless to everyone that's going, with all that's going on in Turkey. Yeah. To London, to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, to here, and all at the same time. And when you don't get FaceTime, there's challenges. There's challenges, and nature abhors a vacuum. And that vacuum that's created by a lack of FaceTime, being able to just walk over and say, or yell over, like, hey, what are you thinking about this? Yeah. If you have to wait 36 hours to get an answer to that question, it's rarely filled with positivity, right? Especially if there's some uncertainty around it and there's a human element. But there's also the idea that, my life is one. I mean, I think balance still applies, but that's more of a personal element than it is a life-work choice. Yeah. I can work from Bora Bora if I needed to, right? Yeah. I mean, there's very few jobs where working remotely isn't an option some of the time, if not all the time. I mean, there are exceptions. Yeah. But for the most, if you're dealing with, typing on a keyboard, right, for your work, you can do that from just about anywhere. Yep. And you should, and that's a gift. Yeah. And we should embrace that culturally. Businesses should find ways. I think that the real challenge now is at the managerial level. What does it mean to manage groups? What does it mean to keep people on the same page? And that's hard.
Especially if you're in different
tools.
locations and doing different things.
Yeah,
on
like
different
Slack
pages.
works great for development teams, but it sucks for people that aren't in development teams. It's just more noise.
Yeah.
Right? It's another place to go.
Yeah.
And so, I think like handheld devices and personal computers like the phone, like the true personal computer, I think, and wearables, as that gets better, I think that's going to be something that's a little easier achieved by managers. But I think that whole management sort of philosophies and everything that applied to sort of like Six Sigma and like, how do I refine this process? Yeah, that can work. There's lessons to be taken there, but I don't think that's the way to live, and I don't think it's the way to manage anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's no disservice to those things, right? They had their time, and maybe the sunset came sooner than anybody would like that really got up to speed on it.
Yeah.
But I mean, even people who are versed in scrums and agile and different types of management, development, and team management philosophies, people are looking to disrupt, and
quickly. I mean, the disruption is coming quick.
Well, and it has to, because that traditional career path isn't there.
Yeah.
So where do I fit in? How do I make a name for myself? And so you're like, what can I find that I can make better? And that's actually, in aggregate, awesome.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's great for all of us. And it's better embraced, and kind of wrapping our arms around it and saying, look, millennials or the younger generation, we welcome this energy, and we welcome your enthusiasm and your lens for being disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side of it, the millennials also have to be sort of, hey, there's still lessons that I can learn where I don't have to learn them the hard way. And when we both achieve that, when I disrupt and I bring in lessons you don't have to learn the hard way, that's magic.
Yeah.
And if we can figure out how we do that better, I think there's a lot of interesting things.
Yeah, I mean, that's figuring out as companies meeting in the middle of saying you have people with 20, 30, 40 years of experience that can be that guiding light, and a younger person that gets maybe today's framework. And instead of just having that conversation be like, well, when I was your age, or me looking at the older person going, you don't know what you're talking about, old guy. As soon as you do that, people shut down. And how do you lift those barriers so that you come and you meet in the middle and saying, let's use each other's strengths to play against each other's weaknesses, which is really the big thing. And I think a lot of companies are trying to figure that out now, is finding that conversation and that balance. It's difficult.
I think so. There's a concept in programming called peer programming, where you have two programmers working on one task, and basically one is just there to sort of be the eyes watching, and it turns out to be really effective, because the eyes watching is just there catching the things that you're always maintaining perspective, because you're not getting lost in the details. But when I think of it applied on a grander scale and in greater context, I'm laughing because I'm thinking of like this scene with the cop, where the old cop and the new cop come in and they've been paired together as partners. But like, if you can take that, right, and you can sort of pair, sort of the 35 and older, right, with the 30 and younger, 35 and younger, then I think there's some interesting things there. I mean, I'm just thinking that out loud now as we're talking about it.
Well, I think it's and I want to come back to House of Genius, because I think House of Genius creates that when you bring these people together, is because of the space of anonymity and putting some of those things at the door. You're allowed to bring people together purely based on ideas and thoughts, not on preconceived notion of, oh, you're this and I'm that, so I'm not going to listen to you, or maybe I will listen to you. You got to push that aside and create an environment. I think it's one of the more authentic, like I said, coolest experience, most authentic conversations I've been able to have because of that. And I think that you guys are onto something really cool with House of Genius. I mean,
well, thank you. Yeah, it is intended exactly. I mean, the thrust of it, if I look back, is based on, having to fight to be known as or recognized as the smartest person in the room, and that's such a waste of time, and it's so much ego. Right?
Yeah. Who's the guy that I need to give my business? I need to talk with, and who's the
And instead saying, look, everybody's here, everybody is. There's a shared interest which puts us all in the room in the first place. Yeah. I mean, that's about as much commonality as you need, and then from there you just want as much diversity as possible, as long as it's allowed to play and give an equal footing. And when you look at like conferences and meetups and startup events, and you see how many unbelievably, wickedly talented, creative, and smart people are in the room, but how few voices are actually the ones that are getting allowed to speak, and the context of what's being spoken, right? And how much is lost, right? In man hours, in opportunity for collisions of ideas and people and interests. And House of Genius was really about this idea that, look, innovation and entrepreneurship is really suffering from this fight to gain access to resources, and a lot of that being IP and intellect and talent. And talent's a Red Sea anyway, with the corporate world and the well-established world. Yet you have entrepreneurs and innovators coming in who are supposed to be the engines of our economic growth that we're all counting on to create new jobs.
Yeah.
Yet they're fighting for the same talent pool.
Yep.
And these people are coming together for these events because we want a feeling of community, and more importantly, an engaged community, a chance that I can contribute and be a part of my community, not that I'm hoping to be in the same room with somebody who's a gatekeeper or a celebrity.
Yeah.
Right. And that's no fault necessarily of the gatekeepers. It's the fault of the system and the framework and the paradigm that we've landed in.
Yep.
Right. But it's ours to change.
Yeah.
And one of the first things we can, I think, do to create that change is something that we do in House of Genius, which is like, look, let's get the posturing and the credentials and all the things that people have been fighting for so long to say why I belong here, why you should listen to me.
You always have to feel like you justify being at the table, right?
Yeah, let's just get that out of the way, right? Because it's wasting everybody's time.
Yep.
And time's our most valuable asset, and this is our time, so let's do something with it, right?
Yep.
And I'd rather get something done and solve interesting problems than play the credential game, right? Like, everybody talks about gamification and getting badges. We've been doing that forever, right? Like it just got, virtualized in a way that made it seem almost silly.
Yeah.
But we didn't recognize that that's what we've been doing in life, period. And that's not to diminish PhDs and people who commit their lives to going really deep, but that's great. But that's not everything, right? And those people are even at their best when paired with people who look at the world in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Right? And are solving problems. And that's what makes community great. That's what makes humanity great. And House of Genius, we didn't realize it at the time, but now we know. Like, we have this grander vision, which is we're trying to transform the way that humanity collaborates. We're trying to get not just to put down your job titles, but your politics, your religion, your nationality. Because at the end of the day, everybody who comes to our events around the world is interested in problem solving and about innovation and empowerment and enablement for themselves, for their families, for their communities. Mm-hmm. And that's something from which, that's the rising tide.
Yeah.
And so, it certainly ties in with what I believe the pressure and the release that a millennial generation is looking for, or a younger generation. But it also allows those people who have really earned their stripes the way they had to still show up and deliver it, I think, in a way where they're not being disrespected, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean,
or pushed to the side.
It's not even the right word, I don't think it's disrespected. I think there's just so much pressure, right? There's just all this upward pressure of all this talent and educated, and like, if I can't get a job, I got to find another way to make my living. I got to make my way.
Yeah.
How do I contribute? I mean, at the end of the day, that all falls back to how can I contribute?
Yeah.
How can I be a value creator? And I mean, how do we not get out of the way and find ways to accommodate and reward that? And the more diversity there is in that, the better. I mean, we all win.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, I know community is such a huge aspect in bringing people together and bettering community, and I think having those conversations is so vital and important and pretty great. And I know that's such a huge pillar of House of Genius. So, how do you see, kind of getting back to the big point and big picture? Big companies obviously are missing out on people like you that are taking that left turn, right turn. Is there anything that you see from your vantage point of things they could do better, whether it's getting involved in the community or what they need to do, or are there a couple things you see like, hey, I think that these areas need to be thought about or changed within company culture, within company environment,
and
on the big scale?
Yeah, there's two ways that I think are really low-hanging fruit and not really hard to achieve. One is kind of taking what we do at House of Genius, but applying it to the internals of a company. Take the U.S. military for an example. That's a good example.
Mm-hmm.
They are successful in many ways at what they do because of their hierarchy, their structure, the tiering, right? The org chart of the military, if you will.
Yep.
But it's also the thing that limits the military from getting access to all of the mind share that it has. Right? I mean, people who are at the lowest ranks are just not allowed to contribute or share.
Yeah, those ideas never make it all the way up.
And so, I think the military knows that, and even like a large corporation, call it like a ConocoPhillips or a Shell, if you will.
Yeah.
Organizations that are so big that nobody knows everybody in the organization, we can come in and we can say, look, let's create an environment where we're holding meetings, where you're not just holding meetings with the people who are in your department, but we have a couple of people who are relevant in your department, but then we're bringing people from all walks of life within the organization.
Yeah.
And that's a way that we're tackling problems, by leveraging the strength of diversity that we have. And the more diversity that you bring, the more perspective and angles that you're looking at. I mean, that is technically the definition of genius, is the ability to look at things from as many angles as possible. We can make that possible, and organizations can open themselves up to that without opening themselves up, in a way that they might not be comfortable to, say, the community at large.
Yeah.
However, I would also argue and encourage organizations to bring people from the outside in, to be a part of conversations.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, especially if they're lightly vetted, right? Like, and that's where maybe House of Genius serves a role in the corporate community, right? In how we, say, look, we've seen this person in a collaborative environment, and they're pretty wicked. There's basically no conversation. Them at the table would be, a deterrent or a problem.
Yeah.
And getting really wickedly smart people from different siloed sectors of the community to come in and tackle certain problems, especially if it means that the organization is going to innovate, thrive, grow. Because large corporations, I like to sometimes say are still startups with just a lot more years under their belt, and they don't always have to be vilified in the community.
Yeah.
But in order for that to be true, they have to welcome part of the community to come in and be a part of it. And so, they're pillars of the community in many ways, and there's no reason that they can't behave and participate in the culture that the innovative and entrepreneurial and millennial generations are. And that's also a great way to get the best thinking on the table, right? Mm-hmm. And not wait for people to go through all of the credentialing and approvals and reviews to eventually qualify and somehow be justified at being at the table. Because if you're playing the justified at the table game, then you're still you've got one hand really holding on to the past.
Yeah.
And so I'm not, I would never belittle expertise. It's absolutely required. But that should be what people are diving deep on because they're passionate about it. But then they're allowed to bring it, and it shouldn't just be everybody who's deep in one sector looking at a problem.
For sure.
You want breadth. You want cross-pollination. You want to cross boundaries, because that's where you get the really interesting, sort of innovative
ideas.
sparks.
Yeah. I forget who said it. There's a great quote. It was somebody in the past, but whenever he met somebody, he said, "I know they're smarter than me in some capacity, so I never come in and say, I'm the best, because they're better or smarter or more efficient at something than I'm not. So how can I learn from them in that capacity?" And I think that's exactly playing to what you're saying, is everybody that has those different points of view can look at something and go, "Why are you looking at it this way? I'm seeing it this way," and it's something that you'd never even thought of before by having that diversity in there.
Yeah, and I would challenge that statement just a little bit.
Yeah.
To say, you have to be careful to use the term smarter, because smarter implies a lot, right? And I think that you can approach and say, this person has a life experience that is not my own. They have not stepped in my footprints all along the way, and I haven't stepped in theirs. And there are lessons from their experience, just like there are lessons from mine.
Yeah. Sometimes
academic, sometimes not, right? That may be applicable to this, situation, or from which I can learn, so that I don't have to go through all those same steps to learn that. Mm-hmm. And so it's not so much smarter as it is,
experience?
It's experience, but there is an onus on the individual to be able to communicate their experience, and then an onus on the other individual to be able to receive it. At the very least, that needs to, if that's in play, that's beautiful, and that requires a very educated public, that we invest in education, that we're getting as much opportunity to be eloquent, whether it's emotionally eloquent, whether it's verbally eloquent, whether it's just the ability to communicate your genius. Like if you're brilliant and it's only in your head and you can't communicate it to anyone, you're going to be a madman.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think creating and investing in an eloquent society is really a good idea.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a society I would like to live in.
All right, awesome. Well, two last questions for you. One, kind of getting back to where we started. You talked about that fork in the road, and when you took that, I think there's a lot of people who are considering that. What advice would you give? I mean, if you went back and you talked to yourself then, or to anybody that's kind of thinking about taking that leap or making a hard right turn, when everybody's like, no, just keep going straight on that path, right or wrong, whether you decide to do it, what kind of things would you tell those people to think about, or what advice would you give now looking back of, of things to consider, and of just not necessarily was it the right decision or wrong decision, but here's things to keep in mind, and here's things to think about.
I think, wow, it's a timely question for me in my life right now.
Good.
People ask sometimes, like, I would describe my journey as one of, it's like a stream of serendipity as opposed to stream of consciousness. But, there are no right or wrong choices. They're just choices that you make. And I would be forgiving of yourself.
It's huge.
Yeah, and that's not easy.
Because you can be so hard on yourself.
We all are.
Biggest challenge.
And it's generally like why we're so resistant to other people being critical of us, because we're already critical enough of
listen, man, I'm already doing it myself. I don't need it from you.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I think the thing that I would love to say, and if I could go back and tell myself this, I would, is that there's one of the balances that people don't talk about enough in life is the balance between opportunity and the balance between the things that you want to hold in life and how risk plays a factor in that. If you take too much risk, if you have a lot of risk in your life, there's not a lot of things like family and relationships that can, withstand a high level of risk that you choose to take on. And so there's this balance between how much risk am I willing to live in, which is, if everybody's going right and right's the safe turn, that's not a lot of risk. And sometimes that might be the right choice. But, I would love to make this blanket statement, but like, always go take the path less traveled.
But that's not necessarily always right for everybody.
No, well, it's not. But it could be. But don't be naive to think that it doesn't come with consequences. It's not always wins. Like, there are wins, but there are also losses.
Yep.
Right? And, I think when you talk about like work-life balance, risk is the bridge there, and nobody ever speaks of that. And I wish somebody had, because it would cause you to look at the decisions and the choices that you have in front of you a little bit differently. Not so much as what do I stand to gain, but what also do I stand to lose, right? Because a lot of times you don't understand exactly what you have until it's gone, and you get so caught up in, I'm going to be the next this, that, or the other, and not realizing that you also, you chase this at the cost of something else. And that's personal to everyone, whether it's you want to be married and have kids, whether you want to travel the world, whether you want to have a pet, there's this risk element. And I feel like life does a really piss poor job of preparing us for that. And I think the millennials get slapped in the face with it a lot,
the reality of it.
They're the ones taking a lot more risky decisions because they're being forced to.
It sounds like really what that means is knowing yourself and knowing what's most important to you, and what sacrifices are you willing to make, and what are non-negotiable sacrifices, right? Like you said, family, things. If that is something that is most important, you can't put that at risk. You can't make that, on the sacrificing block of what you could potentially lose. So I guess knowing yourself and doing that hard assessment is key.
Yeah.
Great.
No, absolutely.
One last question,
Okay.
fun one. We ended a fun one. You're 100 years old. Okay. You're down to your last meal. What is that last meal that Toma has before?
No problem, man. Just
No
tacos.
problem.
So just tacos, some carnitas, maybe some carne asada, with some sliced avocado, some cilantro and onion, really good beer, some good chips and salsa. Forget about it.
Simple.
Forget about it.
That's it.
That's it.
And that's all you need.
That's it.
Awesome.
I'll eat tacos every day.
I know. That's the best. Toma, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Everybody,
Pleasure.
check out House of Genius, houseofgenius.org. It is incredible. We have, how many chapters are there?
32 around the world.
32. And how many different countries?
10.
10 countries now. Ton across the U.S. They're growing. I highly, highly recommend getting involved. Check it out. It is well worth your time. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take care.